This is Allie Larder from Varsity Blues, Final Destination, and Resident Evil. And you are listening to the Don't Go Out There horror movie podcast.
Fear is defined as a feeling of agitation and anxiety caused by the presence or imminence of danger. And whether it's a ghost, a spirit, or an entity, they all feed on it.
In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, welcome to the Don't Go Out There horror movie podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There horror movie review podcast. Hope everyone had a good Christmas. We appreciate everyone who tuned into our Christmas bonus and our episode that featured The Strangers, an elite movie. Don't care what Reggie says at all. Tonight we're talking about another movie that I really, really like. It's hard to believe, honestly, that this movie came out in 2013 to me. It's 6 years old now. It's kind of hard for me to fathom that. Tonight we're talking about The Conjuring, and we're just going to give our basic thoughts and jump into this scene by scene, because this is kind of a long movie, so hopefully we don't run too long for y'all, but this is going to be a fun one to discuss, and I think you'll really enjoy listening to it. Like I said, it came out in 2013. I don't think I saw it in the movie, so if I don't remember seeing it, I probably didn't. I thought it was really good. I'm a big fan of James Wan, the director, personally. I'm a huge fan, honestly. I might have a hot take about him I introduce on this show down the road. This movie is kind of just another Amityville horror type haunting movie, but it's done very well. And I really love how the cinematography James Wan used in this movie, and I love the characters in it. Drew, do you want to go ahead and give your thoughts on The Conjuring?
I love this franchise. I'm gonna go ahead and just say it outright. I love this franchise. Like when the second one came out, me and Nico immediately said, "Bro, we got to watch this straight to the movie theater." And but this movie, it sucked me in right off the bat. It's got the combination of everything. The music was great, like the whole way through. It set the tone for a lot of the scenes. The actors were awesome as Ed and Lorraine Warren. I actually followed some of their stuff before they ever hit the main screen, like some of those like Investigation ID, like the haunting stuff. So I saw some of that, but I love this movie. Love it.
Brian, you want to give your thoughts on The Conjuring?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually in the minority here. I had never seen this before today, actually. It's one of those pop culture things where, I knew about it. I knew the hype behind it. I knew, little things like, the clap game and stuff, that's in pop culture, from it. But I never just sat down and watched it. And I've said before on the podcast, I think it was during Amityville Horror when we were kind of talking about it, even though it was a whole different ballgame. But, I'm demon stuff. Like, I believe in demons, and that shit scares me, to be honest with you. Like, it really, for real, bothers me. And there are certain movies that will really stick with me, especially certain scenes will just really stick with me. And, it messes with me. It messes with me sometimes. I will say, yeah, I liked this movie. I liked this movie a lot. It made me want to get into the whole series because I guess the newer age horror, I never really got into. Probably after about Saw 4, besides, Jason 2009, I don't really think I got into new age horror a whole lot. But, I was really pleasantly surprised with this. To me, it's almost two halves of a movie, and I guess we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But especially the first half, man, it really scared me. It really got me.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right. So, look, I want to start off by saying I love this movie. I think a lot of people thought I was coming in to shit on this film. Not true at all. I think this movie is great, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to have another week of Love Fest, which is fine. I like reviewing good movies more than I like reviewing bad movies, depending on the movie. So, just want to start that off. As far as my belief in all of this stuff, I don't want to crap on that because I clearly have co-hosts that do, and I have no problem with that. But as far as something being scary, these kinds of movies, these possession movies, they don't freak me out. They don't scare me. But I can still appreciate and enjoy what they're doing, the way they're trying to make the movie. And again, hand up if you heard me say this before. The mood, the atmosphere, the lighting, the sound, it's all so well done. The cinematography is great in this movie. And they didn't reinvent the wheel. We've seen haunting and possession movies before, but they do it better than it's been done in maybe ever, probably ever. I'll go ahead and say that. This is probably my favorite one ever made.
Yeah, I just want to touch on something Brian said, then we'll jump into the scene by scene. The demon movies don't really, like demon possession type movies, don't really scare me in movie form, but the thought of a demon scares me a lot. Like if I ever, I've heard, like religious people, church people talk about it before, and I'll be honest with you, I don't ever want to encounter anything with a spiritual activity or demon. I want no part of that. So let's just jump into this scene by scene, fellas. The film starts with a close-up shot of the Annabelle doll, and the screen just says Annabelle Case 1968. It's got Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they're listening to these three, I just call them young adults. They're telling the story of this doll. They say they found this doll, and that the spirit in this house wanted to move inside of the doll. It's Annabelle Higgins. And at first, nothing was that bad, but things got creepier and creepier as time went on. So they came into the house one night and they found this doll that was in the spare room. And then they found the doll in the hallway with crayons in its hands. And they looked in the spare room and they saw crayon marked all over the walls. And they saw on the top, on the roof, on the ceiling, it said, "Miss me." And they was like, oh, hell no. So this girl takes the doll outside, throws it in the dumpster. So that night when they go to sleep, they hear a loud knock at the door. So they go and open the door. She looks on the ground. And she looks around. She doesn't see anybody knocking. But she looks on the ground and sees the same "Miss Me" letter. And they're freaking out. Then there's another knock, but it's inside. They open the door, and it's the Annabelle doll. Then it just cuts after that. It cuts to Ed and Lorraine talking to them. And now that, then it cuts to where they're just doing a seminar. And, they say, well, what's your job title, Ed and Lorraine? What is your profession? They say, some of it they call us demonologists, some of this. Then Lorraine just makes it generic, some people just call us kooks, and everyone laughs. Then it just has a caption screen, and it just says, since the '60s, they're the most renowned demonologists, and Ed is the only non-Catholic church, I think is what it said, member to be an associate demonologist. Then after that, it just cuts to 1971 Harrisville, Rhode Island, is what the screen says. I wrote that this family. You're the family we're going to follow in the film. They show up to the house. They get out of their car. They all run into the house. They're all excited. But something that catches the father, Roger's attention is the dog Sadie does not want to go inside the house. They're begging this dog to go inside, but it won't come. So it's like, all right, screw it. You can just stay outside then. Then I just wrote down, it's just a basic moving stuff into the house, furniture, boxes into the house scene after that. Then it's the evening time. The kids are playing the game called Hide and Clap. The daughter, Christine, is the one who has the blindfold on, and she's walking around this house. And, she doesn't know the house well, so she almost trips over a box. The mom says, don't play in the house doing that yet. You don't know this house good enough. But Nancy is hiding in what they think is a closet, and Christine opens the door, and she catches her, but she knocks a board down. And they're like, oh, what'd you break? Then the father figures out that they have a cellar in the house. And then it cuts to the night scene, and Sadie is outside barking. Mike, do you want to give your opening thoughts on these two scenes?
Yeah, I think these scenes do a really good job of having what I like to call little scares. They're not jump scares. They're not rah in your face. They're little things that kind of make you feel uneasy. The dog doesn't want to come in the house. It's a big one. It kind of puts me in that place like, it's kind of accepted. Dogs know what's up. Dogs know what's going on. That's kind of a thing that most people accept. And when you see that, you're like, okay, I can get with this. And I think that, by the way, I meant to say this in my open, but now I can. Love Vera Farmiga. Love Patrick Wilson. Both of them in this movie are fantastic as Ed and Lorraine Warren. I think they both play their parts so well. And I am a Vera Farmiga stan. I love her to death. I think she's attractive in a way that doesn't make sense, but you can thank Bates Motel for that. But back to The Conjuring, really well done. And I'm not. Look, maybe we'll talk about it another day. But I'm not like huge on the Annabelle doll. Like I don't. That doesn't. That really kind of pulls me out of this whole universe. But in this movie, to set up Ed and Lorraine Warren and to kind of set up why they're important in this film, I think it works. So I like these two opening scenes.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, this movie is pretty quickly establishes that it's, I mean, okay, so this movie is not really a horror movie it's more like a horror movie for people who don't love horror movies like us. It's just,
That's a good point. I
it's
was
like a
gonna
horror,
say that.
it's a horror movie for like, it's a horror movie for like my mom who is just, occasionally will watch one and want to legitimately be scared. There's no gratuitous gore or nudity. It's just psychological. And it's going to be really hard for me to explain, I think, for the first hour of this, like why it scares me. But I mean, I'm going to try. But these first scenes do a really good job, anyway, of setting up the logical parts. I wrote down at 7 minutes and 47 seconds into it when they're moving into the house. If you look on the left, it really looks like there's a Freddy sweater laying on the bench, and I don't know if it caught my eye, so I rewinded and paused it. But maybe something you want to check out. And I couldn't find anywhere if there was any Easter eggs or anything. Mike, did you? You said there was.
No,
some
that's
Easter
all I
egg?
was gonna say is I looked for it because I said I thought the same thing and didn't find anything. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So, and I will say the cinematography in this movie is unmatched. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Fantastic.
And when they're moving in, that whole it's almost like a one shot. It's going from room to room. There's no cuts, and they do that a lot this movie, and it's really impressive. James Wan did a really good job with it.
Drew Chains, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I love the way they introduced it all. It kind of took you somewhere, and you thought it was going to go there. Then it actually pivoted to like the real story of where we're going to go. And then, like Brian said, the way they shot this was incredible. The way they changed just a slight little bit of lighting to set a different mood or tone of what's kind of going on at the time. And like Mike said, like if your dog don't want to go there, you probably don't want to go in there. Like the dogs are gonna be your first line of defense. So it definitely made you pause. Okay, what's gonna be in there, or what is causing the dog to trip out about it? I'm with everybody else on here too. Like the actors, they got it. I absolutely love them, and anything they've done.
Hey, and I will say I really like how this movie really takes itself very seriously. And obviously, those actors, like you guys said, kind of sell that. Not kind of, they sell that. It's unbelievable. But I really like how this movie sets up the rules of this universe, almost basically. Which I mean, I didn't know I don't think they were gonna knew there was gonna be a universe at that time. But they set up the rules of this movie, and they never really stray from it. And I really respect that in the movie. I really like that.
Oh yeah. The next scene is just shows Carolyn, the mother. She's waking up in the morning. She puts her her bedroom slippers on, and she notices she has this really big bruise on her leg. She's like, "Oh, what's going on with that?" And she walks into the hallway. She sees all of her kids coming out of the room. One kid says it's freezing cold. The oldest daughter, Andrea, says, "Man, it smells bad. It smells like fart in my room." She's like, "Well, does it smell like that now?" She's like, "No." I was like, "Well, don't worry about it then. It's all good." Then the mom,
Okay.
Caroline, she makes a point that all the clocks are stopped at 3:07 for some reason. And then the youngest, no, I'm not gonna say the youngest daughter, 'cause I can't remember, but the daughter April, she goes to run outside to find Sadie, and she runs outside. She sees a dog, and she starts screaming. And the parents run outside, and they discover that the dog Sadie is dead, which is very unfortunate for us because we all love the doggos. Then it cuts to Monroe, Connecticut, to the Ed and Lorraine Warren's home. Ed is taking a reporter into the haunted room, as I call it personally. The reporter asks if it scares him to have all this haunted stuff in the house. Ed, he just says, it's better for us to have it here in our house instead of having it in the world freely. So, but he also has a priest come over once a month to bless the room to help keep the demons at bay. And then the reporter just asks to see the Annabelle doll, and Ed makes the comment that this doll is a conduit, which is very important for the Conjuring universe as a whole. Ed, all of a sudden, he hears a noise and he sees Judy, his daughter, in the room playing around. He says, "Don't ever come in this room. You're not supposed to come in here." Then after this, Ed just goes to Lorraine. He brings her some tea, and Lorraine she takes a sip of the tea. It's not sweet enough, but she says, "How'd the interview go?" And Ed says, "It went fine. Everything went good." And Ed says, or Lorraine tells Ed to stop blaming yourself because something happened to Lorraine in a previous incident with them two in a spiritual way, and Ed really feels like it's his fault that she's affected by it. And like all the three other co-hosts said, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are just phenomenal in this movie, and it's really hard to, even if you don't like this movie, you can't leave this movie saying that these two aren't great. Now I'm gonna read the next thing. I'm gonna get you guys thoughts. So it's 3:07 a.m. and it just shows the daughter Christine. Christine and Nancy share a bedroom together. You know, Christine complains. She keeps saying, "Nancy, stop grabbing my foot," because she's feeling something grabbing at her foot. And she's like, "Nancy, stop farting," because they think the room stinks really bad. And then it just shows Roger. He fell asleep at his desk and he wakes up and he hears like a staticky TV and he hears a knock in the house and he just walks around and he goes into the hallway and he sees a door open. Then he walks up the stairs because he hears another noise and Andrea tells Roger that Cindy's in her room sleepwalking. And I guess like it's like this dresser that opens up and she's just constantly walking into it back and forth, back and forth. So Roger just takes her to bed. The next morning, Roger notices another bruise on Carolyn's back, and as a husband, he's like, "You need to go to the doctor and get this checked out." And as he leaves the house to go to work, he notices all these birds just flying into the house, and he's just like, "I think Roger's starting to catch on, man. Something's kind of fishy going on." Caroline, she walks into April's room. She walks in April's room because she hears her talking to an imaginary friend, Rory, as he's called. She does this music box, and it's got like this little clown that comes out, and it's got this little mirror that rotates. And, just get a little jump scare where the daughter just says, "Boo, I scared you, Mommy." Then they play hide and clap together. Carolyn, she goes into Andrea's room where that drawer that opens up. And she hears the clapping, but it's not April. It's, as you see in the trailer, it's that spirit, it's that demon, it's that spirit. And you see the hands come from behind the clothes, and you see the clap, which is it kind of, that's like one of the first scenes that catches your eye that says, "Oh shit, something's going on in this house." And she rips the clothes open and she sees nothing in there. Then April says, "Mommy, you weren't even close. I was in Catherine's room." And the mom just looks around in the room puzzled. Drew, what are your thoughts on those things, buddy?
Well, I want to kind of touch on something like when she found the toy, when she first found it. This is what I was talking about, like how they changed like the mood just by changing just a little bit of lighting. You see when she walked up to it and found it by the tree, like how as she picked it up, like the backdrop changed and it just slightly in a different color, and it just kind of had an ominous feel to it, and it gave me a chill when that had one come. The clap game I think is pretty daggone awesome. They I don't know. Was it a real game? Is it like a real game? I'm assuming it is if they just put it in the movie. But the little girl sleepwalking into armoire, is that what they're called? Armoires. They that was kind of odd. I was just like, man, just sit there and made the same kind of thumping noise that you eventually hear later on. So
Go ahead, Mike.
So, a couple things. I just to piggyback off of what Drew said. I think that they do a really good job of kind of switching the camera work up, switching the lighting up in these couple scenes to where it's just enough to make me, I don't know, it made me feel uneasy, and it's really tough for one of these kind of movies to do that. To like make me, to kind of suck me in and be like, "Ooh, okay." And the hand clap thing, I have a nitpick, and as much as I'm going to shower this movie with love, I have a small nitpick. I love the hand clap. Great stuff. However, whoever did marketing for this movie did a really bad job of giving too much away in the trailer. Because I remember seeing this movie in the theater, which, by the way, the theater experience, I plan on talking about it at the end, but I might as well now. The theater experience is much different than watching this movie at home. In the theater, this movie is great. Like, it's so great at home, but the experience is much, much different. Lights go down. surround sound, like you hear every little move, every little thing. And so the in theater experience is awesome with this movie. However, leading up to the release of this film, the trailer gave a ton away. The hand clap thing is one of those things, and it's the same gripe I had with Halloween 2018, same gripe I had with Conjuring, where we gave a little too much away there. So that's kind of what, when I watched this movie back, I remember the trailer coming out and thinking, well, damn it, like, why are we doing that? Like, but it's still scary. It's still really well done. Still, and by the way, anytime I've said this on many episodes, anytime you involve kids in horror, whether they're alive or you kill them, it just hits a different note, man. It just does.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, and then you killed the dog, and man, I was just like, God damn, killed the dog. Come on. I knew this
Oh, I
movie. I knew this
know.
movie was serious.
Oh, that
It deserved
man,
it.
that's like, honestly, that's the saddest part of this whole movie to me is the freaking dog. I know the mom loses her shit. Spoiler alert. But man,
But this movie really does a really good job of the point where just any normal activity that they do kind of makes you cringe with anticipation, and it has to do with a little bit with the music, but it's also because it's built you up already, and it's just the beginning too, because you're almost exhausted at the end of this movie because you're just so ridden with anticipation. I was anyway. It's starting to get to the point in this movie where it's starting to kind of really bother me. Like the biggest scene that I think anybody can say, hey, what do you remember from that movie, from Paranormal Activity, and what was that, 2007 or 2009 or something like that, I think, when that came out. But it was the, hey, her being pulled out of the bed by something, just pulled out of the bed by her leg hanging out.
Right.
I think that's the most memorable part of that. And so that stuck with me. And so to see that kind of again is just kind of bringing back these old, like, really cringy feelings that I had whenever, this first scene or whatever, when I don't remember which daughter it was, but when she kind of pulls on her leg a little bit, and she blames it on her sister, and then it's kind of left alone. But obviously it comes up here pretty soon. But the movie's starting to bother me a little bit, and I watched it at home by myself. I wasn't in the theater, and so that's kind of a catch-22, because it's like, okay, if you're in a theater, a good theater with a good group of people, that's great. But if you're in a theater where everybody's talking, running their mouth the whole time, that can kind of, I think, take you out of it too. So I'm glad to hear that the experience, was good for Mike whenever he was in the theater. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts.
So later that evening, the dad, Roger, he's on the phone. He's talking. He's a truck driver. He's getting he's getting another route, but he's kind of complaining that it's like, man, this is way below, my asking rate, but I'll take it. We need it. So, after that, the mom she just says, we're going to get through this tough time. Then it cuts to Christine in her room again, and it shows Christine laying down in bed. And this time you see her get her foot pulled, like, for real. Like, she gets drug almost off the foot of the bed.
Oh, here we go.
She starts panicking a little bit. She's like, Nancy, stop pulling on my foot. But she notices Nancy's still asleep. So she starts, it shows her, like, with these really cool shots to me of her looking over the foot of the bed, then over the side of the bed. Then she looks under the bed she looks underneath the bed where she can see her bedroom door. And I think that shot's really good. But then she's like, she sees something. She sits up and she says, Nancy. Then Nancy wakes up. And then Christine, she's like, do you see it? Do you see it, Christine? Do you see it? And she's like, no, what are you talking? She's like, it's behind the door. There's somebody in our room. And then, Nancy gets up. She opens the door a little bit. She's like, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And then Christine says, it's right behind you. Then the door slams and they start screaming and the parents run in. And Christine says, the spirit. And, the mom is hugging her and the dad's asking, like, what's going on? And then Christine says, the spirit said it wants my family dead. And this is where the movie, starts to, it's like in a roller coaster. Once you start going up that hill, your heart,
right.
It's when you start losing your breath a little bit. It's kicking up now. Then Ed and Lorraine, they're off to see Father Gordon about a case. And I just wrote the words in quotations, I love Vera Farmiga. Because she is so supportive of her husband in this movie. And they're such a team, and Ed just doesn't want to put his wife at risk anymore. But she's like, God put us together. We're a team. I'm going with you regardless of what you say. Then it shows Carolyn. She's taking some meds, and she notices more bruises on her chest. Then she goes into a room. She's folding up laundry, and she hears a clap. Okay, she's like, "Why are y'all playing this right now?" So she's walking through the house, and she sees the kids laying in bed. But then all of a sudden you hear this really, really loud crashing noise, and all the pictures that are on the wall fall on the ground. Then the clock starts going off really, really loud, and then the mom hears another clap, and she sees the cellar door opening. So she goes down into the cellar, but she falls down all the steps, and as she's running up the stairs, the light blows out. She gets to the top of the door, or on top of the stairs by the door. She lights a match, and she's looking around. Then the match goes out, so she lights another one. Then you see that scene you see in the trailer where the two hands are right behind her head or right beside her head, and it claps. She starts screaming and yelling and panicking. And you hear that spirit say, "You want to play hide and clap," and it's really creepy. And then Andrea is in her room again. She notices Cindy sleepwalking into that same arm wall, and she like, all right, just lay down in my bed, just go to sleep. And she lays her down in the bed, but she sits up because you keep hearing that thumping noise. It sounds like she's still walking into it, but she's in bed with her, and she flings the doors open. She doesn't see nothing, but then the other daughter who's laying in bed sees the demon Bathsheba is the demon's name on top of it, and it jumps on top of her. Roger gets home from work, and he just hears nothing but screaming from outside of his house. So he runs into the house. He flings the door open so Caroline can get out from the cellar. Then they run into Andrea's room to see this spirit just wrestling with her, and like he's just like freaking out. It's like, what the hell is going on here? What's going on? Brian, you want to give us your thoughts on those two scenes, man?
Yeah, man. All right, so this one had this one had me pretty messed up, man. I will have to say the camera work whenever the girl's upside down looking under her bed and then sits up and the camera goes like upside down and comes back and like makes you really feel like that you had just been upside down looking at the camera or looking under the bed. I wrote that down, and and man, the basement scene, dude. James Wan, he really. Every time she kept lighting that match on the stairs, I keep anticipating, all right, but one of these lights, you're going to see a face in front of her. And James Wan's like, nope, motherfucker, over here, clap, clap. And so that really, I think that got me even. I was like, fuck. Like I remember during that scene, I was just like, man, this 100% has me. And I hate to keep comparing it to Paranormal Activity because that's the only thing I can think of to verbalize like why it bothers me. It bothers me to barely see the demon stuff. It bothers me to feel like it's real and almost like that's where I believe in it. Now, and after the hour mark on this movie hits, it stops being scary to me. Like if the movie had just been haunting these people, doing this stuff, gradually getting worse and worse and worse, I guess kind of like Paranormal Activity did, but with more of a story, like it would have been terrifying to me the entire movie. But once they start showing the demons a lot, it becomes a witch kind of and not really a demon to me at that point anymore. And then we kind of get into more of the investigation. It becomes a better movie. It just doesn't it's not scary for me anymore at that point. If that makes any sense. It's hard for me to explain.
Go ahead, Mike. I see you nodding your head. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with him on the sense that I don't dislike anything going on there. But I almost, when that happens, it almost becomes like a faux documentary in a way. And I think that's really, really well done. It's really well
it's kind
shot.
of basically what it is.
Right. Yeah. And everything you see from Ed and Lorraine's perspective is kind of faux documentary. But they do hand clap to James, hand clap, that's kind of funny. Hand clap to James Wan because he does a really good job of making you see things from different perspectives. Like when stuff's going on with one sister, you're almost seeing it from the other sister's point of view. And I think it's really well shot. It's really well done. So I think James Wan does a great job with that. And, like you said, Brian, these movies don't they don't scare me, but there's some suspenseful shit in this where I'm like on the edge of my seat, like, okay, where's this going? And once you just kind of start seeing Bathsheba, you're I'm not taken out of it. I'm in a different place. I'm like, okay, now it's almost like an investigation documentary. We got to find out what's next. We got to find this thing. And by the way, tip of the cap to I didn't get the actress's name. I wish I had. Tip of the cap to the woman who plays the mom, because she does a great job showing descent into madness. Like almost as good as Margot Kidder. So uh probably better. No offense, Margot.
Lily Taylor is her name, actually.
Okay, so Lily Taylor does a great job of showing happy-go-lucky mom to I'm about to lose my shit. What is going on here? And the hand clap scene that you talked about is very well done. So again, all good, except for the fact that now I'm no longer on the edge of my seat. I'm like, okay, let's see what the Warrens do. I mean, they get me back, but there is a point where I'm kind of like, all right, it's a documentary at this point. So there's nothing wrong with that. I love documentaries. I wanted to make that distinction like Brian did.
Go ahead, Drew.
That's interesting. That's interesting because like the biggest thing when we was reviewing like with the Blair Witch, you was like, oh, we never really saw anything. Oh, it would have been better if we saw something. Now you kind of see it and you're like,
I know.
well,
You've got to ride the line, and the Blair Witch you don't see shit. In this movie, you see a little bit. You're on the ride. You're on the wave, and Juan makes you. Juan makes you ride that wave. You think you're going to see something, and it's over here in the corner. So they do a really good job with that until you start to kind of see a little too much, which I've had. That's a complaint in every movie of mine, including my favorite of all time. So
Oh no, it's all good.
Yeah.
I was like, well, hold on a second.
No, that
I
is
thought we
good.
touched
Yeah,
that before. But as far as the scenes here, like, each breakdown, like the scene there is like, there's so many different emotions attached to it. There's so many different perspectives taken from each one, and the tempo and the tone of the movie, you feel it rising, but you don't really feel how high it's rising until you get to that point. And then it's like, bam, right in your face. And then it drops you back down. It kind of slows you back down. And to me, those are the kind of movies I like because I'll never get bored with those type because you're going to keep me interested the whole way if you keep me thinking the whole way through. And that's why I like the way they did it when you talk about it goes into the investigation part because it changes up a little bit different from where they were going. So I'm still going to follow, but it's not so different. I lose all the rest of the beginning parts, I guess, if you're saying. I don't lose the scariness part of it. I just like kind of segue into, okay, let's Scooby-Doo this shit.
Go ahead, Brian.
So it's almost like Paranormal Activity is not some sort of masterpiece or anything, and I'm not trying to say that. It's just like Paranormal Activity actually scared me a lot. But it wasn't a very good movie. Does that make sense? So, this was almost for the first hour Paranormal Activity, and it was actually a better, it was better done.
Version.
It was a better version, and it was actually scaring me for real. And then once that stopped, it became almost like, I don't want to say a thriller, but it was almost like a more of a typical horror movie that I'm used to. And the demonic stuff became not scary to me. It didn't become the demonic stuff that I'm actually scared of, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was really realistic for the first hour, and then it became, okay, well, this is a different type of demonic stuff to me. That's and it's like I said, it's hard for me to explain that, I guess. But I guess think Paranormal Activity, and then versus like, this for the next hour. That's the way
I mean, I get what you're saying because I think kind of you're touching on the fact that like you're talking about these possessions, and you've seen them all. There's like each decade or century or whatever has had their own take on possessions and movies and about possessions. So you're so used to it being portrayed a certain way, and then when that demonic possession is not portrayed that way, I hear you're just like, okay, that doesn't really scare me because it wasn't the same way as they've always been done.
Right.
So after the night where the father comes home and experiences all this stuff at his house, it shows the next day, or I guess it's the next day. Ed and Lorraine, they're giving this lecture at a university. They're showing all these students this film of an exorcism they done. And after they show the film, he pulls the screen back up and he just has the words, infestation, oppression, and possession. It's the 3 stages of demonic activity. And he breaks all the three stages down for the class. And then after that, it just shows Ed and Lorraine at their car. And then Carolyn, she's brought there by a man, and Carolyn meets the Warrens after the lecture. And she says, Can you two come to my house? My house is in danger. And at first they're not really on board to go to this house because they're just, they probably heard this 1,000 times. But I really like, I can't remember what she said the actress's name was, but Carolyn, she really expresses like the true fear that she fears or that she feels in her house. She tells them, there's so many bad things going on. And she says, my 5 daughters are in danger in this house. So the Warrens, they get to the house to meet the kids. And you immediately see on Lorraine Warren's face that she sees something going on. And all the kids and the parents, they say, we're all sleeping downstairs now because it's a lot warmer and they feel safer. And then they bring up that they smell like this rotting meat smell. And Ed tells them that rotting meats could mean demonic activity. And then the father, Roger, says, and at nighttime we have these doors like tied together so we don't hear the 3 clapping noises. Because the claps come in threes, is what they say. And then Ed's like, so you hear the claps in threes, and do they stop at dawn? He's like, yeah. Ed says, well, they do that. Demons do that as an insult to the trilogy. They go into the cellar, and Lorraine says that she feels like something super evil has happened here. Then they're in the kitchen, and Ed asks, after they're in the cellar talking to the parents, Ed and Lorraine are sitting with the parents at the kitchen table, and they start, recording everything. And they say, why don't you guys move? And they say, well, we have all of our money tied up. We have nowhere to go with 7 people. And Lorraine is with the daughter, April, and she asks, can I listen to, let me see this music box. As the daughter brings up this imaginary friend, Rory. So she does this music box, and she looks into she looks into the mirror that's on this music box. And as it's spinning, she looks into it, and she sees behind her behind the door, the little boy named Rory, and she turns around and he's not there anymore. And this, even though this scene was in the trailer, it still was good to me. Lorraine, she leaves outside the house and she goes down. I guess it's a pond or a lake that's on their property, and she walks onto the dock, and then Ed follows behind. And as he hears it, she turns around because she hears like this rope noise, and she turns around and you see those like gray feet right beside Ed's head. And then she looks up and sees the whole body of a person who hung themselves there. So they tell the parents that this house needs an exorcism, and they're freaking out because they're like, oh God, I thought it was just people. They said, no, this house is possessed as well, and it's coming after the family. So they just tell them, they got to get proof for approval for an exorcism. Ed and Lorraine are back home, and they notice that the recording, and then I wrote down on my notes, guys, I put like really big highlights by it because I think this scene is underappreciated, but I won't say underappreciated. I don't think it's talked about enough, but I really liked it. They're listening back to all the tapes, and they notice that you can't hear the 2 parents tell their story. And then Ed tells Lorraine, so what did you find out about this house? He says the farm was built in 1863, and it was built by a guy named Judson Sherman, married to a woman named Bathsheba, related to Mary Town Est, who was hung in the Salem witch trials. And she said Judson caught Bathsheba sacrificing their son 7 days after the birth at 3:07, and the son was pronounced dead at 3:07 a.m. She hung herself on the property and proclaimed her love of Satan, and she cursed anybody who would go to live on the property. Then Lorraine brings up the fact that another woman was killed herself, and she brings up all these other deaths on this property because the farmland had been, subbed out over the years. She brings up the fact that a woman killed herself in the cellar. She brings up the fact that a boy drowned in the pond, and a maid committed suicide. Then all of a sudden the tape cuts back on, and you just start hearing like these demonic moaning, and you hear like them screaming. And I just wrote down that I just really liked that scene because I could feel the teamwork between the 2 of them. You could feel the bond. You could feel how strong their relationship is. Drew, do you want to give your thoughts on those scenes?
Really, the only thing I really would like to say is I like how at the end, and they're talking about it, and she's like, I noticed that there was a black mass attached to each family member when I went into the house and looked on. Also, I want to say, literally the fakest family picture known to man that they showed. I could have photoshopped that better.
Oh man, it's
I
rough.
saw. I was like, damn,
Yeah,
it's
I know.
terrible. That was terrible.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, like Nico says, you can definitely tell, and this again goes again, for them picking the right actors for this. Like
They
you could
just
tell
showed
that
it.
they were a team. They just went so well together, and you could see it. Like even portraying then, I like legitimately thought I was like, man, it's like they've been working together forever, and then they just go digging in, and then they find out what they want to do. They have a game plan. It's very well. They're very well thought out individuals. Like they're very pointed with what they do and how they attack. These possessions and these other things. They always go through their little thing. Well, it was the pipes. Blah blah blah.
Go ahead,
That's all
Mike.
I have for those.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. No, to piggyback off kind of what both of you said, these scenes right here kind of show me we have two really smart people that we're dealing with Ed and Lorraine Warren. They know their stuff. And again, we talked about it a little bit ago where it kind of switches to an investigation movie in a way, but it's so good and so captivating. What like the details they're finding out, you know, that first hour or so, you're kind of waiting on that, and then you get it. They start to fill in the blanks. Why Bathsheba is there? Why that's basement cellar is haunted? Why the mom could possibly be starting to kind of lose her shit. You start to fill in the blanks, and they do a really good job. And again, for a movie that doesn't necessarily scare me, they do a good job of still keeping my interest as far as just the storyline, the plot. And I know that this is based on a true story, and it was based on, a real family. And of course, like any movie in Hollywood, you have to kind of take some liberties.
Mm-hmm.
But some of this stuff clearly, at least to these people, happened the way they said it happened. And that bumpy ride is kind of fun. Like, I'm not going to lie. So while not scary, I enjoy these scenes. I think from a narrative standpoint, they're necessary, and I think they're really good. The acting in this movie by everybody, including the kids, is A+ to me.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah, so this is where the movie to me takes a hard left turn, like at the fork in the road. And notice I didn't say goes south, because it absolutely does not. And that's not what I mean, because while the first half of the movie may have scared me, like Paranormal Activity, for instance, it's not something I want to go back and watch over and over again. Why the hell would I want to go watch a movie that honestly scares me? I mean, it's just not interesting. It's not something I really want to go do with my life. Where like this movie like goes from being scary to an actually good movie, and it does a really good job at this point of world building. Building the whole basically Conjuring universe, giving you in a very quick amount of time like a very thick and thorough history of the house, the farm, Ed and Lorraine, like the whole. It gives you a whole lot of information very quickly and very good, and it starts like I said, world building, and does a very good job of it. This is where it actually becomes an interesting thriller, actually movie that I would like to go see over and over again.
Oh yeah, I agree. So just bear with me, guys. The next two scenes are kind of long, but I'll get off you guys' thoughts afterwards. Ed and Lorraine and their crew, they show up to the house and they start setting up all these motion detectors, bells, these these things that take motion detectors where they flash whenever something walks by. Then it shows Lorraine and Carolyn. They're discussing this family portrait of them at the beach, and Carolyn just goes in depth of how much that day meant to her, how much she loves her family. Then it just cuts to investigator Drew. He's flirting with the oldest daughter, Andrea. Then they get this false alert with a bell, I believe, and it's just Brad. He's just using the bathroom. It's a little bit funny. He walks, is like, "Hey man, you got to go sometimes." And then it just shows Ed walking throughout the house. He's putting up crosses throughout the house, just to help ward off the spirits. But then you hear another bell go off, and then the cellar door opens. So Drew follows them downstairs. and this is where the Warrens go downstairs to just investigate the cellar. And then, they're just they're recording all of this. Then they walk, nothing really happens downstairs. They walk out and the door just slams by itself. Then I just wrote down, now we're the next morning, all the gang is at breakfast. They're having a good time. Ed tells Lorraine that Lorraine's outside, hanging up like sheets and the laundry. And Ed tells Lorraine that he loves the country. And then Lorraine says, they have such a beautiful family, Ed. Then all of a sudden it gets really, really windy, and it shows the sheet getting blown off of the clothesline up into where Carolyn is sleeping at. And Lorraine sees like this spirit walking in there. So she runs into the house. Then it shows Carolyn. She wakes up, and then Bathsheba is over her body. And you see like Carolyn or Bathsheba just like puke her spirit into her mouth. And like she just like awakens, and you see like her face blacken a little bit. And then by the time that Lorraine gets in the room, she's in the bathroom, and she plays off that she got possessed. She just says that, I was just a little sick, don't feel good. Then the scene cuts to where Ed and Roger, they're working on this car. And then Ed tells them that the things that Lorraine sees and that the things she encounters is what Ed says, it takes a piece from her. And in the last possession that they dealt with, he said that Lorraine she really, really, really suffered from it because she locked herself in her room for 8 days and didn't come out with no food. Then it shows Brad. He's pouring himself some coffee because he's really tired. But he hears like these noises outside, and he goes out there and he hears, "Look what you made me do." Then he walks back in the house and he sees the spirit of the maid who committed suicide in the house. And he walks in to see it. Then it like attacks him. Then it shows Cindy sleepwalking. She's walking up the stairs, and you see these motion detector lights flashing as she walks by. And Ed and Lorraine is like, "Don't follow her yet. We got to watch this. Something's going on." Then all of a sudden, this door slams behind her. So they run up the stairs. But Lorraine and Drew, they jump on the headphones to listen to what's going on. They say there's another voice in there with her. So Brad, he runs down to get this UV light, and they trace the footsteps in the room. And they find that there's, just like in the cellar door, there's an opening inside of this dresser or that armoire or whatever. They've been, that's been utilized in this movie a lot. They find that April's been hiding in there. And then that's where she says that Rory hides. Lorraine goes into the wobbly, I call it the cubby hole, and she asks for the music box. She plays the music box, and she finds this rope, and it has a noose at the end of it. Then all of a sudden, she falls through the cellar she falls through the cubby hole into the cellar, and she starts hearing all this laughing. And she turns on the music box, and she looks into the mirror, and she sees the mother sacrificing the daughter. Then all of a sudden, you see the feet of that hanging body from outside just appear right in the cellar with them. And she runs out of the cellar, and she says, "I know what happened." She says, "Bathsheba possessed the mother who sacrificed a child, and she's possessed Caroline now, and now she's going after her kids." Now the scenes are really, really long too. It's like, like I said before we jumped into the review. I mean, this movie is like almost 2 hours long, and there's only 15 chapters on the whole Blu-ray. So I mean, these scenes are like 10, 11, 12 minutes a piece, and that's why I'm reading so much of my notes at a time. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so let me just hit on a few things. When they first introduced Brad, the cop, I didn't like him. I thought that he was going to be just comic relief, and I just didn't like his character. But the scene with the maid ghost, kind of scaring him and all that stuff. I mean, it was okay. I think this was a good good example of James Wan kind of saying, okay, you think that this is where this character's going. You think that this is going to be like the Dewey basically character where it's just going to be comic relief. And he's going to be stupid, not believe in any of the ghost stuff. And he takes you a different route with it. And by the end of the movie, I really actually ended up liking this character. The only other scene I really kind of wanted to touch on was the scene where Lily was in the bed and, the demons over her. This kind of, I mean, I don't say it scared me, but I suffer probably 6 or 7 times a year from sleep paralysis. And so it almost feels like you're awake, but you're asleep. and you can't move at all. So the whole time you're trying to wake yourself up, well, me at least, trying to wake myself up or get my wife's attention. But it always feels like somebody is like sitting on your chest. And like if you look it up, it's linked a lot to demonic things like that, just because of history, and that's kind of where they went with all of it. But it's really probably it's just I experience when I'm super sleep deprived, and that kind of hits me. But and so that scene itself kind of I was like, oh, I don't know if that's what they were trying to portray, but that's the way it came across to me anyway.
Go ahead, Mike.
So, to me, these scenes, man, they are long, and not in a bad way necessarily, but they're very narrative driven. They kind of set me up, and then I didn't take a lot of notes on these scenes because they kind of felt like run on. Like I'm kind of like, okay. And so, not bad, just kind of like I'm ready for the climax. I'm ready for something a little bit bigger, a little bit crazier, which I know I'm more like a subtle, but eventually kind of ready for something to happen. And so I'm not saying nothing happened in these scenes, but really good setup scenes for what's about to happen, what's about to come. And again, I agree with Brian about what James Wan was trying to do here.
So the next day, the Ed and Lorraine, they're walking out, they're leaving. Ed tells Roger that they're going to get this film sent to the father to help get approval for the exorcism, and that Drew is going to stay and keep watching and help watch out for everything going on. But it shows Lorraine going down to the dock one more time, and she sees this drowning body floating by, and she looks at it and she notices that it's her daughter Judy's face. So she runs back into the house to call her mom, because as her mom answers it, she's like panicking. And then Ed walks in and says, what's going on? So she says, I saw this dead body float in the water, and it was Judy. She said, I thought it was a warning of something to come. And then it just shows that the family, they're taken to a motel room. And then it shows Ed and Lorraine talking to the father, and, they're sitting down watching, and they're looking at all the pictures they got in the film. And the father, they talk about how serious this is, but he says it's going to be hard to get approval for this because the kids aren't baptized and they're not members of the church. Then it just shows Judy, she's at home in bed, and her necklace beside her bed that's hanging on a lamp starts to shake, and it's spinning around, it's going nuts. Then it shows her foot getting grabbed just like the daughter at the house does. And so she gets up, she's walking around, and she starts calling out for her mom and dad. But I wrote down, like, it's like this spirit is chasing her throughout this house, because everywhere she's going, like, all the lights keep going out. And then she goes into her parents' office, and she shuts the door, and she hears this, like, banging at the door. But then the lamp that's on, the light goes out. And she turns around, and she sees this woman rocking in this rocking chair, and it's got the Annabelle doll in her lap. And you see, like, the Annabelle doll's head start to like, exorcism turn towards the look at her. And she starts banging on the door, yelling for Nana, Nana, Nana. And the Nana can't get the door open. And then as Ed and Lorraine, as they're pulling up to the house, Lorraine feels something going on in her spirit, that something's not right. So they run in. Ed, he finally gets the door open. And as he does, the rocking chair flies at them through their house and almost hits them. But Ed pulls Judy out of the way. And then he just goes into the haunted room to make sure that Annabelle's still in the case, and she still is. Hey, Mike, what are your thoughts on those two quick scenes, man?
Really quick. For someone who's not scared of this movie, that little bit kind of got me a little bit. I'm like, okay. And anytime you involve a kid, I've said it a million times, man, you can tell that kid is frightened. And so I'm kind of like, ah. And again, I said I kind of crapped on the Annabelle doll earlier, and I will continue to crap on the Annabelle doll as if we ever talk about the Annabelle movies. But in this scene, the way it's done, the way it's shot, the way the kid is terrified, I love it. It got me right back into how I felt in the first hour or so, as far as just like, oh, okay, here I am, I'm ready. And again, this scene, the kid is great, Vera's great, good stuff.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so I was kind of the opposite with that. It didn't really scare me at all.
We
with this.
disagreed.
The band is
We
breaking
disagree.
up.
Mike and
The
Brian
band is
disagree
breaking
on
up.
something.
They're going solo, baby.
Yeah, and so I was trying to figure out the whole time, like, what was the point of the Annabelle doll in this movie? They were number one trying to world build, because I know like later, they've had what 3 Annabelle movies since then, and I was like, are they sticking this in this movie just so they could have spinoffs? Because I really didn't. To me, the whole first scene was okay, yeah, it was tense, but you could take it out of the movie, and it literally has nothing to do with the movie unless he was trying to only make it a little bit scary for this scene. But all the doll does is turn its head, and that's it. I mean, so I don't really know the point of the Annabelle doll, I guess, in this movie. And maybe you guys can correct me, or I'm not really sure what James Wan was trying to get at with it, but to me, it just doesn't. The doll just doesn't do anything for me.
I'll
Go ahead,
say
Drew.
it was the scenes itself were pretty intense. I love this scene, the when the rocking chair explodes, and everything, and then the terror, the pure terror that just builds on this child's face, and as it progresses through the scene there, where it just like intensifies. But to piggyback what you was talking about there, Brian, I really honestly think the reason why, I mean, I don't know for sure, but this is just my opinion. I think he put Annabelle in at the beginning to kind of set down what they
Yeah.
do, kind of
Yeah, I
like
think so
give you
too.
that knowledge of like, okay, here, this is kind of what they do. This is a little snippet of what they did, and then he also was able to use it there at the end because it's stuff at the house, like uh, you know, they keep all their trinkets. I mean, if you don't know Ed and Lorraine stuff, they keep everything. So
Right.
Yeah.
they were establishing that part. But I love the fact that they built such a really strong bond between Lorraine and her daughter.
Right. Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, from there, it's like, oh, something's wrong, and that's mother's intuition to begin with. Most mothers you talk to, they had those type of feelings, those type of, feelings in their chest or whatever you say. And then like, I love that they did that, and it was great. I love those two scenes.
Go ahead, Mike. I saw you put your hand up.
So I agree with you, Drew. I think, and I might have mentioned it at the very beginning, but I think the Annabelle doll is in this movie because it sets up what Ed and Lorraine Warren do.
Mhm.
What are, and they, it even says Annabelle case 1960, whatever. Well, that's there to let you know these are paranormal investigators. This is why we're about to feature them in this other like why they're important. They are really involved in a very publicized case with this Annabelle doll, and now they're important figures. This family goes out of their way to get them to be a part of what's going on inside this house. And I think the Annabelle doll, wow, again, meh for the rest of the Conjuring universe. And this movie, I'm fine with it
It's
because,
better than a Raggedy Ann, which is the
well,
actual
that's the
doll.
original, right? That's the. And by the way, there's a Raggedy Ann cameo towards the end here. You see it towards the end of the film. There's a Raggedy Ann cameo, and I'm like, okay, you didn't want to pay to use Raggedy Ann full time, but just a little cameo never hurt anybody. So yeah, that's honestly this Annabelle doll. I mean, isn't even as scary as an old ass Raggedy Ann doll, really, in my opinion.
Well, and it's not, I don't know. To me, I mean, I could take it or leave it. I almost got the world building part. I got the room, I got the artifacts, I got that whole thing without seeing the scene. I mean, honestly, and I think that
Right.
this scene was really good. I didn't mean to take away from the scene with the chair being thrown across. Like that was really good, but you could take Annabelle out of that whole scene and
And it
it
would still be
still
good.
be very good and still be the same exact scene. So it almost took me personally, I'm like, man, the doll added nothing to it to me. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Like if you take it out, the scene's still a great scene.
Yeah, yeah, they did very good acting.
I don't know if y'all wrote that fun fact down, but what Mike just brought about the Raggedy Ann is they actually went with the porcelain doll because they thought it looked scarier than just a Raggedy Ann doll.
Hey, I
Told
don't
you.
even know if I agree with
Told you.
that. I don't know if I agree with that.
um, After this, it just shows Roger. He gets back to the motel where his family is, and he jumps out, and the girls all run up to him and they say, "Mom left with Christine and April, and they're heading back to the house." So Ed and Lorraine, Roger calls Ed and Lorraine, and they're like, "Get to the house now." then it shows Brad. They can't get the door open, so the detective Brad, he takes a shotgun and he shoots the door open. And it shows Carolyn. She's trying to kill Christine with these scissors, and it's really, this is really intense, guys. This is the ending of the movie. It's really intense. She's trying to stab Christine with these scissors, and the spirit, they get Carolyn off of her, and they try and take her out of this house so they can get her to the father for the exorcism. But as they go to take her out of this house, it kind of, like in 30 Days a Night, whenever the light hits the vampires, that's what her face and her body looks like. It looks like the spirit is like burning her from the inside out. So they say, we can't take her from this house, so the spirit will kill her. And then the spirit just like throws her on the ground and then rips her down into the cellar. They chase after her into the cellar. And like Caroline she's going like ham on him. She's like she bites Brad on the face. She's throwing Ed around. They finally, get Lorraine, she throws a sheet over her head, and then they tie her up to this chair. And they say, Father Gordon's not going to make it. So Ed, he says, I'm going to do this exorcism. And he tries to get Lorraine to leave because he remembers still what happened in the last exorcism that they were a part of. And he doesn't want Lorraine to, suffer anymore or lose another piece, as he'd say. But, she says, I'm not leaving. We're in this together. This is why God put us together. So she runs outside to get the book. Then it shows Drew running throughout the house, scrambling to try and find April. And then back downstairs, Carolyn is making all these evil noises. And then Ed throws holy water on her. And then it shows all the drawers in the basement shaking, and then everything's moving and vibrating. It's going nuts down there. Then it shows all these gigantic flock of birds outside. They're flying into the car window that Christine's in. They're flying into the house. And then a bird flies into a window that goes down into the cellar. And everything in this room is just going super nuts now. And then the husband, Roger, he is terrified because he sees all these bad things happening to his wife. He thinks that this exorcism is killing her, but they keep saying, Roger, we need you to speak positivity. We need you to speak good things into her life right now. And then it shows the sheet right above where her face is. It rips, and you see Bathsheba's face now. And you see blood spewing out of her face onto the sheet. And then this is a really good scene to me. She cries, it goes back and forth between Bathsheba and Carolyn, and she starts crying for Roger's help. And then everything stops shaking, and the chair starts to levitate. And then it starts doing rotation. Then it stays upside down. And then the spirit drops her and the chair breaks. And then she sits up and she starts laughing really evil. And then you hear Drew upstairs saying that he found the daughter and she's underneath, I think, the kitchen floor. So Caroline, she sits up real fast, real evilly, and she laughs and she grabs those scissors and starts chasing after this daughter. And she finds a hold of she gets a hold of her daughter, and she's getting ready to stab the daughter and kill her. But Ed, he catches up to her and yells out her name. He yells out, Bathsheba, I call you out. And then Lorraine puts her hand on her head. And then, Lorraine's telling Roger, speak positivity. And then Lorraine is just saying, you remember that time at the beach? I need you to fight for your family, fight for your love for your family. And then all of a sudden, as Roger's, speaking positivity, and Lorraine, and she's praying some good things over. And then as Ed is just calling out Bathsheba's name, you see this light form around her head. And then she's falls to her knees and she vomits up the spirit onto the ground. Now I'll read the last, happy part next. Brian, what are your thoughts on that exorcism scene?
So I'm really glad that they let Ed do the exorcism and not, the priest. I really am glad. It adds a personal touch to it, I guess, that
Right.
you wouldn't have gotten from if a preacher would have come and done it. And I really like the part where she takes off with the scissors and you're just like, oh shit, boom, right through the walls and through all the parts that they've established, through the whole movie are there. I will say, going back to let me just say also, I haven't seen this movie, like I said, and I wanted to do something different. Very rarely is there a movie that I haven't seen, much less a very popular movie like this and an entire universe built up about it that I didn't watch, didn't care to even take a gander at it. So when I found out we were doing this movie, I told you guys earlier, but I want to tell everybody else too, I didn't do any research on it. I wanted to do something different and go into this completely cold. And actually, when I said that earlier about the Annabelle doll, I didn't until you guys told me. I didn't even. Now it makes sense. It makes sense because it was a real. There's a real doll out there. There's a real. There a museum or whatever that they kept this stuff in. So it makes sense that they would put that in for people who knew that. I was just strictly looking at it from a movie point of view. But now that I know that, it makes more sense, and it doesn't. I view the Annabelle doll, I guess, a little bit differently in this movie now that I see that. So I just wanted to say that.
Go ahead, Drew.
I love these. I love these ending scenes. It's very one of the few times like when the demon's face like breaks through, the rip in the thing, and you see the blood, and then just the demon's like half face coming out, and then just this craziness going on, like that. The hairs on my arms were standing up. It's like there's like 5 real good peak moments in this movie that did that to me. Just got me amped up, adrenaline's running, hair standing up on my neck and everything, and it's just it was so intense and well done. And there might have been a few moments, a few things you probably could have took out of it, but nothing that took away from the movie. But when she I put my note down here on when the demon goes, she's already gone. Now you're all gonna die. I was like, well, damn, that's a little intense. Okay.
Oh, that was good stuff. Definitely good stuff.
I'll say I was impressed with the makeup. I guess it was either makeup or visual effects or the combination of both for the for when the demon come through the mom. I was really impressed. I thought it was a thing of beauty.
Yeah, very well done. I agree.
Go ahead, Mike. What are your thoughts on the exorcism scene?
Loved it. And normally, for someone who's not a fan of the of mostly exorcism type scenes or movies, thought it was really well done. I thought the cinematography is good with it. I think the effects are good. One thing, man, it kind of like what Brian said. Ed doing the exorcism is much more important than bringing in a priest. It hits home the fact that if you know, well, at least if you know the Warren story, you know that he's recognized by the Catholic Church. So once you know that if you know that going in, you know why that makes sense. And again, I think that it's an intense scene, and the scene works because the movie is kind of so calm for a lot of the ride. Like, it's a bumpy ride. There's little scares here and there, but the mood is so calm, and then it's like, whoa, 0 to 100. To quote great philosopher Drake, 0 to 100. And I think that's why the scene worked for me, is that it was just like, okay, now we're in some shit. And like you said, the demon or Bathsheba, it's great. Now you're all gonna die. Like, that is good stuff. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, one of the good things I'll say too is I liked how they kept it under the sheet, the demon under the sheet, and the changing. It didn't show it to you. They James Wan, like, let you hear it, let it build up before it finally showed it to you. And I really liked that. I think that added a lot to it. They didn't go straight, The Exorcist with it, where it was just boom, Linda Blair is just, possessed and looks crazy, like, so I almost called her Linda Hamilton too, because I was just watching the Terminator. So, but anyway, I just wanted to add that about the sheet.
Drew, you got any more final thoughts on the exorcism before I read off the last scene?
I think the only thing I was gonna say is with y'all talking about how you're glad that Ed's the one that they've had Ed the one doing it, because I think that gives you a sense of familiarity with the character that's actually going to be doing some of the most important work.
Right.
Had they brought in that priest, even though he was very minute in the movie, and had he come and doing, I think it would have lost a lot of luster to it. I mean, granted, they're basing this off the Warren files, so they probably wouldn't go change that because that's not what happened. But I can see what you're saying. Like, if it would have, the movies would have changed it and let somebody else do it, I think I would have lost a little bit of the love I had for that scene.
It's also different. Every exorcism movie we see eventually involves a Catholic priest, and while there's one there, this is different. And I think that's why I liked it so much. I'm like, okay, because again, every exorcism movie almost ever is. The power of Christ compels you,
Uh-huh.
not to
Right.
be cheeky with it, but you get my point. And this is different, and I thought it was great. And by the way, Patrick Wilson, great in this scene.
Yes.
Awesome.
And I was about to say, when he like, shit's
Fantastic.
about to go down, when he
Right.
pulls that necklace out, it's
Right.
like
It's
do do
great.
do do do
Yep.
do bam, and dropped it, and then it was on.
Yep.
And everything that's going on with his wife too, it adds so much more of a personal touch to it, rather than if
Exactly.
you just had brought in the priest. It just, like you said, it wouldn't have been the same.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. And this is the final scene. It just shows they're carrying Carolyn outside the house. I wrote as a free woman, basically. She hugs April and Roger. Then it shows all the rest of the family showing up from the motel. And this is kind of a little bit of a funny scene to me. The guy, Drew, walks up to Brad and says, "Hey, do you bleed now?" And Brad's like, "I'll take a guy and a gun over any day over this." Then it shows the Warrens, they're at home, and Ed, he puts the music box into the haunted room. Lorraine goes and calls the father to tell them all what happened. And she tells Ed that there's a case in Long Island that they'd like to discuss with him. Then it just shows at the very end of the movie the music box plays one more time. So that's the final scene of it all. Drew, you got any quick thoughts on just that last scene, the freedom and the Warrens at home?
Just to go show you that even when you go through the proper channels and they got through with everything, they were like, oh yeah, we approved it, you can go do the exorcism now. Like, okay, you're a bit late on that. We went ahead and did our own thing. You're a bit late. I love it. I like the ending. I think the ending did well enough there, but I could have been better. But I liked how it popped up, and you hear the music and you see all the other trinkets and stuff that they pull from the thing, those, and then you just like I instantly thought when I was at the theater and watched this movie, I was like, oh my god, there's so much stuff here that they're going to be able to do so many more movies with, and I was ready for them.
Mike, go ahead, bud.
So I think this a little ending scene kind of brings back a sense of calm in a weird way, just like it kind of brings you back to what the rest of the movie was like outside of the last like 25, 30 minutes that you just saw, maybe a little less, but it kind of brings back a sense of like, not realism, but I don't want to put it that way, but just like it brings you back down from the high you were just on. And by the way, the music box, anytime there's a music box, I get a little creeped out. I'm not going to lie. So I thought it was good. Thought it was a good way to end because you don't want to just, you don't want to end on too, I don't know, you just don't want to end too crazy because we've already seen as crazy as it can get, unless you have another really cheap jump scare, which would have completely killed this movie for me. I'm glad it didn't. So thought it was well done.
I think the reason why they didn't, though, if you think about it, I don't think they had plans at that time to probably make another one yet because they didn't know how successful this one was going to be.
Well, yeah.
Had they known the success it was going to have, they probably might have like played kind of like another little intro like they did at the beginning of this, but only at the end of rolling into another investigation that they were going to go into instead of just ending
Right.
with the thing.
Right. I'm sure they had no idea they were going to have a universe.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, they might not have had known they were going to have a universe, but I really liked the line at the end where, she says you got another call, basically implying for people the little Easter egg implying, oh, hey, they're going to go do the Amityville Horror now, that's built based on, which I liked that. I like that little, it was a, hey, to be continued without really being to be continued. So, and like I said, I came into this cold and I'm continuing to stay that way because I didn't want, I really, when I finished this movie, when I got to this point, I really wanted to watch the second one. And I didn't want to watch it because I didn't want it to affect the way I looked at this movie, like a lot of times sequels do. So,
right.
And that's a great point, Brian. After watching, before Conjuring 2 came out, I love this movie, and I still love this movie. But after you watch the second one, honestly, the second one is so damn good. Like,
I love that second one.
Like the second one almost affects the rating of this first one.
It does.
Because it's so good. Do y'all want to jump it? Do y'all got any more final thoughts on the ending, or you want to jump into this? I wrote some fun facts down.
Okay.
I got a few
real
too.
quick. Hey, real quick. I know we like to do. I like to at least talk about it every movie. Yeah, I know. I missed her real quick. And that's
Is this
fine.
the budget?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I wrote it down too. But go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So it was, they had a $20 million budget. They made over $300 million. I could never actually pin down the exact amount. Maybe somebody else can. But they made over $300 million, which is a lot of damn money for a $20 million movie. And I thought it was kind of cool that it was rated R because there's not a real good reason that it was
Right.
rated R, but it's rated R as almost like a symbol, like this movie is scary to people.
Yeah.
Like it's a scary movie, and there's not a lot of gore. There's not any nudity, really. There's just it's rated R because it's scary, and I think that's very cool. One more thing, it ranks in the top 10 horror movies all time as far as money made. It sits right around Silence of the Lambs, sits right around uh, Poltergeist and stuff like that. So it sits really high. It sits right up there with Seven, which isn't a real horror movie; it's a thriller, but that's fine. It's still in that category, in that realm. And worldwide, I think I said over 300 million. It was probably a lot more than that if someone pinned down the exact amount.
I'll go ahead and read mine off, then I'll let y'all jump because I wrote down the exact same thing Mike said. The budget was $20 million, like he said. Opening weekend, it made $41,855,326. It grossed in the U.S. $137,400,000, and worldwide, like he said, it made $319,494,000. The production team, they built a 50-foot tall tree for the set. Patrick
Wow.
Wilson and Vera Farmiga both traveled to Connecticut to meet Lorraine Warren prior to filming. Director James Wan modeled the film's cinematography and atmosphere after vintage 1970s horror films. And another one that Mike touched on is the film contains no sex or nudity, little profanity, tame and mostly bloodless violence, brief depictions of alcohol and no smoking, and it was rated R solely off of the scare factor. And I got
Incredible.
all of mine off of IMDb. Drew, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I got three here. There was actually a bidding war for this movie. It took over 20 years to
Yeah.
actually get in there. It was between six different studios. Six different studios. Um, it said before and after that, the fate of the film was stuck in limbo because it took 2 decades to get it done. Um,
Wow.
it actually had a different title to start with. It was actually originally called The Warren Files, but they changed it. And then my last one is that Lorraine Warren actually has a cameo in
Yes, she
this.
does. She is in the front row she's in the front row of the
Electric.
classroom
Yeah.
when Patrick Wilson is talking. So
Mhm.
she's the old lady, and I think that's really cool. You pretty much listed all the ones I had outside. Originally, the idea of this movie was to tell it from the family's perspective. They decided to change that as production went along. Which again, the Ed and Lorraine Warren has been used for Amityville, this movie, the sequel to this movie, Poltergeist. It's the Annabelle movies, like even the Nun. Like all the way down to those movies. Their stories have been used over and over again. So I think it took so long because I couldn't quite find where to place this one. There was a lot of back and forth on production and budget, and ended up being a smaller budget than it originally was supposed to be. And so it took 20 years. It took a little bit over 20 years to get this film in gear. And by the way, another really cool fact is the composer who composed the score and all the other music for this movie played Bathsheba, wore the makeup, did all the
Oh,
stuff.
wow.
So the
Wow.
composer
cool.
is actually the person that played the demon in this movie. I thought that was pretty cool. So, it's also at the time was the highest opening for an R-rated film ever.
Before we jump into our ratings, I wrote down, I talked about it earlier. I wrote down, to me, an underrated scene of the movie was just when Ed and Lorraine are discussing the tape and the findings that Lorraine found on the house and property. I don't know why, but as I was taking notes on it, I felt the connection between them two. Like, I mean, you already felt it, but I really felt the connection between them two as like a couple, a team, professionals. I felt all of that together in one scene, and I don't really think that scene would get talked about much, but I really liked it. I don't know if y'all have any favorite or least favorite scenes, but Brian, you can go ahead and go with your rating, brother.
That's interesting what Drew said about the original title. Usually I'm like, wow, that was Redomer, those Redomer. I really actually like the Warren Files. Almost if you could have gone like the Warren Files, colon the Conjuring, and then you could have really built a world off, you know, every time you had a spinoff, you know, the Warren Files, this, whatever, and it would have been very obvious to everybody that it was all a shared universe. I almost like that better, to be honest with you. Um, as far as the ratings go, I really, like I said, I really like this movie. You know, even though it was two different halves, I think that made it better. I'm going to rate the movie an 8.5. I really enjoyed it. Um, you know, like I said, I wish I could kind of go back and fix maybe some of my earlier ratings, but I feel like I'm in a flow. You know, like I said, I really like this movie. This is also based on me not seeing any of the other ones either. So, you know, like I said, my rating for Friday the 13th Part 4 was probably affected because I knew I liked 6 better. You know, things like that. I knew that Tommy Jarvis was, you know, going to be different later on. So I don't know any others that's going up. I kind of like going into this as something different, something that I haven't really done in a long, long time, going into something cold like this. So I'm kind of excited about it. I'm ready to watch the second one.
So the Conjuring for me on this one is just like Brian's 8.5. So between very good and excellent. I love this movie, and I rewatched it, and I had to take the second one out because it's so damn good. Then just focus my attention on this one. But it's an easy 8.5. I'll watch if it comes on TV. No ifs, ands, or buts.
You know, hey, let me just say too, I'm probably the same way as you are, Drew. I don't know if there's there's a couple movies out there that I like that I would rank a 10 easily. And that's just my favorite, you know, some of my favorite movies out there. But horror movie wise, I don't know if I've seen a 10, but it's really exciting to watch some movies that I've never seen before like
Right.
this that are really good, that hey, maybe it's out there, and I'm kind of excited about the possibility of that.
That's like with Mike's selection with the bonus drop. I never saw that movie, and I was like, oh my god, he actually
And
picked
why
a good
would
one.
you?
I loved it, and I loved it. It just
Right.
threw me off.
Right.
I'll go ahead and get my rating next. You can go last, Mike.
All right.
I rated the movie a 9. I'm going into the 2 decimals tonight. I rated the movie a 9.25, 9.25. I wrote down, I absolutely love this movie. I really like the family of the Roger, Carolyn, the kids. I can put myself in all of their shoes, I felt everything they were going through. I love the house. I love both houses. I love the Rain and Ed's house, and I love the Roger and Carolyn's house. I think the cinematography is amazing. The acting is great. The atmosphere in this movie is executed greatly. I'm a huge fan of James Wan, and I wrote the biggest benefit of this movie is Vera and Patrick. They're so great as the lead couple. Honestly, I mean, if you told me, if I didn't know who they was and just watched the movie and you told me they were married in real life, I would believe you. I really think they portray a married couple great. And my only con really is I didn't see it in theater, so I don't have that experience. And the second one kind of puts it down a little because the second one is so great to me. But I wrote not much bad to say. It's just not the most original movie ever, but it's executed damn well. So I gave it a 9.25. Mike, go ahead and drop that rating on us, brother.
I'm gonna give this movie a flat 8, and that by the way, that's not a knock. I think 8's a high rating. I love this movie. Again, not scary just because it's not something that scares me, but the movie itself, the story, the plot, the way it's shot, the way it's directed, the direction that it goes, and the way it sets up the second one, which it does affect my rating. Now that I've seen both movies, so that movie affects this rating. The spoiler alert, second one will have a higher rating. But this movie is really well for laying the groundwork for the second one, and I think it's a flat 8. I think that's fair. It's really well acted. I love everything about it. Not many negatives outside of the way they marketed this movie, which that can go to hell. One per show. Got to have it in there. So I give it a flat 8.
That's The Conjuring, fellas, and I love that movie personally. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been listening to us ever since we started this. We're going into a new year, and I don't want to count my eggs before they hatch, but we've got some things cooked up, hopefully, that comes through for us throughout the month of January. We're going to be reviewing The Conjuring 2 next week, and a friend of mine who's a big time, we're hoping we got a big time guest for us next week, especially if you're a Florida State football fan. That's how me, Brian, Drew, and Mike all know each other through Florida State football. So we're hoping we get a guest on next week who's, if you're a Florida State fan, he's a superstar, honestly. He's one of the best players of all time. we're hoping he said he's going to be on the show, so we're hoping everything goes through. But we thank you. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I thank all three of y'all for being on the show with me. I really enjoy doing this every week, hanging out with you guys and just talking horror movies. We talk about this shit on the timeline every day. It seems about whether it's me and Mike slandering each other or just thinking of new ideas, new reboots. Brian dropping some hot graphics on us every day, which I really appreciate. And I'm really excited to be doing The Conjuring 2 as the first movie going into the new year, because there's a Conjuring 3 coming out too later in the year, which I'm really excited for.
Right.
Drew, give me your thoughts on that new Conjuring going into next year. What you thinking, brother?
So I looked at it. It's called The Devil Made Me Do It. So it's off of the one guy. I can't remember the name of the guys, but real quick, but it's off a guy that actually tried to use. He killed. I think it was. I can't remember if it was his parents or whatever. He killed somebody in his home or whatever, and then he actually tried to use the demonic possession as his defense in court.
Interesting.
So that's what this one's about. So I think this one's going to be really good. I have a feeling it's going to be really good.
Do you mean like he's using it as a fake, like he really wasn't possessed, or he was possessed and he's using it as an excuse?
That's what he is. That's what he. I mean, he legitimately likes. Oh, I'll look it up right here. That's real quick. Let's see.
Yeah, I haven't even watched any trailers or done any research on it. I'm kind of still in the blind about it, but if you say there's a new Conjuring movie, I'm definitely excited and ready for it.
Okay, so it's a fight for the soul of a young boy that takes them beyond anything they've ever seen, and it marked the first time in U.S. history that a murder suspect would claim, possession as their defense.
Oh wow, okay.
Whether it was or wasn't, that's kind of, the movie can prove or disprove whatever. But I'm not going for a factual standpoint from this. I just want it to be a really fucking good movie.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh, yeah. Anybody got any final thoughts on just the show as a whole going into the new year, guys?
Man,
I appreciate all of you.
Man, I'm excited. I like that I know we started out as almost like a slasher show. It's kind of our logo, and we will. I've had a bunch of people ask. We will get back to doing some slashers, I promise. But to me, it's fun to kind of dip and dive in a bunch of different genres, and I think, like you said, you talked about having Rashad on the show. That's going to be great. Right after that, we're going to cover Halloween 2018, which I will nitpick to death. So prepare yourself, listeners. Prepare yourself for me to carve that shit up like a Thanksgiving turkey, because it's coming. And I still like the movie. I'm not saying that, but here it comes. And after that, I don't know if we want to announce. I mean, I'll save it. We have a lot on deck, so I'm going to save it. So again, we have a lot of different subgenres of horror coming. Eventually, Drew's going to get to pick a movie. I swear, it's coming. I promise. And we really appreciate every listener that we have, man. It's kind of weird to see it grow. It feels good. It just to see where we started. I get text. I'm starting to get, we're starting to get Instagram messages and Facebook messages and stuff like that, and stuff on Twitter. And so really cool to see it grow. By the way, rate, subscribe. I'm going to annoy the shit out of everyone with this, but rate, subscribe, please. It really helps us out, and it grows the show. And by the way, shout out to horror YouTuber Cody Leach, who is now a subscriber and listener to our podcast. Hopefully he gives us a cheap plug soon so we can.
Hey, we're going to be having a YouTube channel here soon too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. YouTube channel. Oh, and by the way, we're going to a horror convention. Spoiler.
Yes,
February. Going to a horror convention.
Yes, we are. No doubt.
Looking forward to it. And as far as the new Conjuring goes, really looking forward to it. Can't wait. Only thing I'll say, don't overdo it. This needs to be it. Done with the Conjuring movies, because my rule of 4. After 4, so they got one more. Just the Conjuring. They could do spinoffs all they want, although they've had some shitty spinoffs. But after 4, I have a rule of 4. After that, you're done. Looking at you, Halloween.
I was actually going to say something about that, Mike, before we closed out. The first 2 Conjurings are great. Some of this spinoffs in the universe, just like every horror franchise, they kind of stink. Brian, you got
No,
any final
none.
thoughts about just the show and all, or going into the new year?
No, man. Hey, I don't even feel like a co-host. I just feel like a fan, and I'm appreciative every time I get to come on here, man. It's awesome just sit down and talk about horror movies with a bunch of guys that I consider friends. So I'm super excited about going into the new year and everything that we've got coming up.
Drew, anything else?
No, I'm just saying. I'll say this: if I can watch a bunch of slashers, and Brian can watch the stuff that he doesn't really get into, our fans can do the same thing. Enjoy the
Exactly.
journey with us. Enjoy the
Exactly.
journey with us.
No doubt. Hey,
I watched Amityville Horror again, so that's how you know I love you, buddy.
if just a couple people pop in some movies that you've never seen before and just give yourself venture out of the box a little bit. Hey, we've done our job.
Silent Night, Deadly Night is the perfect example of that. None
There
of
you
you
go.
had ever seen it. I recommended it on a whim as a bonus, and we all ended up enjoying the shit out of that.
There you
So
go.
that's really good. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
One more time, thank you to everyone who listens. And just want to remind everybody to don't go out there.